free will, expression, love of family, God. We are here. We want a pro-human future. All right, Dark Journalist joins us. Written for the Wall Street Journal, you name it, author, top filmmaker, award-winning darkjournalist.com, Daniel List, Dark Journalist on X. I wanted to get him on because he popped in for 20 minutes yesterday, but he has more time to absorb this data dump. Michikaku and others are on Fox saying the biggest thing ever, full disclosure is coming. To me, it was a nothing burger, a bunch of old videos, a few new ones, Tic Tacs, some new documents that were interesting, a shot of a stretcher with a body bag on it. Is there an alien in there? But the bigger issue is, why are they doing this now? And just as it's been predicted for decades and decades and decades, they're creating all this fear that the aliens may attack. And there's this big fight over disclosure. And now what Liz said yesterday came out last night that indeed Trump wants more release. He says it to be released. The CIA is not releasing it. Just like
a lot of people have been saying for quite some time that this was going to be coming, that it was going to be a absolute distraction, almost like a 9/11 style moment where they would hope that they could create a massive one-sided enemy and that people would unite around it and rally around it. People have been saying that for quite some time at this point. Obviously, none of us know if that's the case, if that's actually what's happening. But to Alex's point, so far, been going through as much as we possibly can, as quickly as we can, and there really isn't much there. There's a couple, little tiny tidbits. Obviously, we're talking about the UFO release, like all the files that have been coming out. Why now? That's a huge question. That is probably the number one question: is why now? Obviously, the administration right now is in turmoil. They're in shambles. This war is an absolute disaster. Their numbers are tanking. Could be a good distraction. Could be a good distraction. That's definitely high on top of the priority list. Even if that's not the number one cause, that has to be in baked into the cake.
They said bring out some of the Epstein stuff, and then they gave them old information. So to decipher this and break all this down is Daniel List. We'll go through some of these clips. But to me, the most important thing is what I can observe with my own eyes and what the astronauts have said they've seen. But all the ancient texts, whether it's the Mayans, the Aztecs, or 5,000-6,000 years ago, the Egyptians, or all the other cultures in the Middle East, and what the Dogon tribe have to say, it's all the same story over and over again. It's all not just in the book of Enoch that was pulled out of the Bible and found in the Dead Sea Scrolls to be real, but it's in Ezekiel, it's in Genesis, it's everywhere, and it's just cut and dry. But the Christian pastors are like, oh, the whole Bible's literal until it's giant flying saucers landing in floating platforms with creatures with blue crystal bubbles over their head, and it's all described, and telling them about all this, and God says that he's marooned these bad things here, and you got to watch out for them. And then you go read about the Anunnaki, and you go read about all the other ancient civilizations saying the same story. So to me, that's what's hardcore. So Daniel List, a lot to unpack here. Great to have you since we talked 24 hours ago. What do we know now?
Fantastic to be here, Alex. And I'll tell you this, you're right on the money with this, because what's going on is they released stuff that basically is the dividing line between people who knew anything about the UFO file and people who knew nothing about it. And the people who knew nothing about it thought it was a release. But in fact, it is very, very dominated by stuff that's already been in the public domain. The videos they released some of them were provably false, and they did that on purpose. They're leaving this wide open, but they were able to create the buzz while not actually giving the public anything discernible in the way of real links back to the past. What I noticed was a big emphasis in there was this Apollo 17, the sightings that they had on Apollo 17, and I put up some posts that we'll look at later. But the deal is this. Immediately after that, Jared Isaacman came out and started talking about how the last time we were on the moon was Apollo 17. So the coordinating here with NASA, and NASA, of course, holds the largest bank, the entire tranche of the UFO file images from the satellites and all the rest of it, along with the National Reconnaissance Office. That's not the stuff that we got to see in the releases that were going on there. And it's very interesting because one of the things that the Trump administration did is they took Victory Day from World War II, and they used that as the day for this non-UFO disclosure release day. But certainly that's, again, attaching the war aspect to the UFO aspect is not good. When they did the Department of War and they said war.gov/UFO to get all the documents, that wasn't good. So, they're attaching this war idea to the alien file and to the UFO file aspect. That's where the UFO threat comes in, the total opposite of real disclosure. Real disclosure would show that the CIA, the NRO, and the NGA have been holding back these files and manipulating them, moving them through offices in the United States government so that the public could never get at them through normal journalistic, inquiries and the types of things you would do, like FOIAs and all the rest of it. So we're in a very squeezed situation where Trump is trying to now retain that UFO file back under the executive branch, but is prevented from doing it because the hold of those agencies, especially the Central Intelligence Agency, is beyond. This is something many presidents realized once they got in the door. The CIA holds that power. And what do you do to get it back? You move in different ways to move the power back under executive control. In the case of the UFO file, you have another group working between the aerospace defense contractors and the Central Intelligence Agency. And we have to remember certain things, that there may be agencies that have been created out of the black budget that we, the public, don't know anything about. This is the core aspect, really, because we had the National Reconnaissance Office created in 1963, actually under the JFK administration. We didn't find out about it until 3 decades later. So the question is, what is the agency that's operating now that is managing the UFO file and this disclosure while preparing the public for this UFO threat? And we don't even know the name of the agency. Well, we need to get to who that agency is. And the way I've identified it is through the X-Protect group and the people and the sources in the background. The thing with X-Protect is you never get to see the members up front. You're not going to see them in front of a microphone, but you can see the people that they push up to the microphones. And most often those people are counterintelligence people promoting the UFO threat that we need to fight back against. Now, Trump was very honest. One of the things when he was talking about the Golden Dome and saying, well, this is Star Wars 2. In fact, this is SDI that Reagan wanted to do, which was a gigantic missile defense system in the 1980s. And then supposedly when the Cold War happened, that all went away. Well, no, it went underground, and this is what took place. The SDI program continued on, and now Trump is saying we have the technology because you've invested in it in the public, after all, for the past 4 decades, and we could fight off the incoming alien invasion with the $300 billion boondoggle of the Golden Dome. Now, you can say there might even be an argument for the Golden Dome. I'm not saying it's even, you know, a project that shouldn't happen, but it should be very clear what it is. That is a UFO defense grid, no question about it. And even Trump, as I said, has put this across. Now, Reagan, when he built SDI in the first place, he was actually thinking we're under an alien invasion, we're under UFO attack, because he was being shown pictures of craft that were refueling in the rings of Saturn. Yeah, it's on the record. The scientists have talked about him being shown those videos. Scientist Norm Berggren and others like that. So they came forward and did this to Reagan, and they said, oh, they're moving in on us. And Mikhail Gorbachev, of course, famously with Reagan, had that conversation and revealed it many years later and said, yeah, he came to me and said, there's an alien threat. Are you going to help us fight against the UFOs when they attack? And he made Gorbachev in Reykjavik, Iceland, agree to actually do that. So this is the type of conversation that goes on in the background. The problem is, in terms of the UFO threat aspect, that is completely created by these groups. And we have never seen, the scientific aspect of the UFO file is the most intriguing aspect, because it looks like what we have with the UFO file are groups that are coming in and looking at things and scientifically evaluating us. Are those groups human groups that are just slightly ahead of us in terms of the technology? That could very well be, and we need to be aware of this possibility, that it's not all extraterrestrial to think about it that way. However, there obviously is something relating to, for example, our excursions into space that has to be kept secret. And part of that may be ruins on the moon, or it may be the fact that in 1972, one of the rumored aspects is that we continued building up, but we were actually warned off the moon by a third entity. It wasn't the Russians, it wasn't the Americans, it was something else. So we need to keep this in mind when we look at this, the types of things that that deep state is managing on their own. If we can see through them to the things that they're afraid of, then we start to get a real handle on what's happening in terms of these releases. This is like a G-rated fluff release that came out yesterday. And, some people would say it's better than nothing, and I can accept that. What I don't like is that it massaged this whole idea.
Well, look at that footage right there. That looks completely fake.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a lot of fluff that's been moved in there. And, what's fascinating is there are fantastic, and I mean fantastic video that's available for them to release. We've seen it come out in leaks in various places, et cetera. They let out, like I said, basically the Walt Disney G-rated version of things yesterday. And there are a few things that you can read into it that are intriguing, especially the aspect, like I mentioned, around what they were showing in relation to the moon aspect.
And let's get to that in a moment, but let's go back to this. Some people are saying, well, at least they're admitting it's real now after denial, so that's the big move, and that this was just announcing, okay, it's real, now we're going to start telling you. Well, then why did you give us something real up front? But separately, stuff we said yesterday went viral, what I said about this clearly trying to create an alien threat. People said, oh, where do you get this? But they didn't watch the full show, where we described how this has been well-known. Werner von Braun told his assistant, wrote books about it. They have the space program. I mean, this goes back really to the beginning.
Oh, there's no question about it. The Central Intelligence Agency was created right after the Roswell incident. That should link those two together forever. And the thing is, the development over Roswell, there were crashes that had happened earlier. In fact, Cape Girardeau had happened earlier. That was in 1941. Same circumstances. A craft goes down. There are small bodies. It's all covered up. And the senator that's involved becomes the president. That's Harry Truman. So, you have to understand in the background, the UFO file is a very big, it's a lot of clout if you have anything to do with it. That's why I thought when Trump was dealing, first off, when he was coming in 2016, all this UFO, UAP stuff was coming up from the Hillary campaign. And it was very interesting because often Trump would go on the stump there during the campaign and say, oh, Uncle John Trump, and we know very well that Uncle John Trump was in those programs. So, I'm not saying that Trump is some Time Lord wizard who knows all about the UFO file, but he might have enough information to realize, oh, there's a whole second system of technology and finance that goes on here. That's a secret system of finance, a secret system of technology, completely run by the deep state. But the way that they do it The money goes out the back door, and in the public, we have all these gigantic deficits. Alex, when on earth do we have the ability to ramp up to $40 trillion in debt? It doesn't make any sense unless there's a secret space program that's sucking in all that money.
Well, that's right. And bottom line, the old system's coming to an end. They need distraction at one level. They know they can't hide anymore. And as you document, this has been documented, there are different competing forces. You believe Trump is on the side that wants it out. The X-Protect group has been documented to be real. You predicted if Trump goes for full disclosure, we'll see a bunch of disappearances and death. Some people, like Stephen Greer was on a few weeks ago, he said the general probably is alive. He may be scared himself and gone into hiding because maybe he's a bad guy. Is there any weight to that?
Well, I have some very deep information about McCaslin. I've been tracking McCaslin since he disappeared, and I'll tell you this. So we know that he was involved at Wright-Patterson with redeveloping the UFO file. It's on record through emails sent from Tom DeLonge to John Podesta that came out through WikiLeaks. So it's a fact on the ground that he was working on these programs, and he was helping to set up an entire team to do it. But what he was doing in the background was working with his assistant, Monica Reza, who also disappeared, and she had developed this Mondaloy, super alloy metal, and all of our space engines started using that starting in 2012. We didn't need the Russians anymore to go do a launch, but before we were begging them just to get into space. So that group, eliminating that group was very important because what had happened, and this was just confirmed now by a counterintelligence agent who came forward as a whistleblower, and his name is David Grush. I've spoken to him, and one of the things that he had to say was that McCaslin was on a hostile witnesses list that people like Burleson and others wanted to bring forward. So he was going to be compelled to testimony just before he disappeared. This is important because by putting him on that list, it may have made him a greater target, or they may have said, well, we can't have this guy out there talking about redeveloping UFOs at Wright-Patterson and at Los Alamos. So what are we going to do? Not only do we have to get rid of him, we have to get rid of his team. And if you look at the missing scientists piece, and we put some exhibits up about the missing scientists, I think it's like 3 or 4, and the 3 or 4 is the number of the exhibit. Those missing scientists were all associated with this team, and they had an administrative assistant who had a top secret clearance as well. But it was McCaslin, Monica Reza, who was his assistant, who created this patent on this amazing alloy that they got from redeveloping UFOs. And she disappeared in June of 2025. He disappeared February 27, 2026. And Melissa Cassios, who's the administrative assistant who disappeared under strange circumstances, she went missing in June also of 2025. They got rid of the entire team. And the guy we're looking at there, Mark McClandish, is somebody who was at a secret space conference that we sponsored. In fact, we did it in Bastrop, Alex, right up there. And I think they have, right now, they have Elon Musk has his starbase there. But we did that conference. He came forward, and McClandish had shown so many things. One of the things he had done, and I'll see if I can get the number here of the model, but he had put up this model for what he had seen. It's Exhibit 6. Let's take a look at this, because he was an aviation illustrator who knew people inside of the military and in aerospace. They had shown him these advanced craft, and he had detailed the look and the study of this. This was at Norton Air Force Base in the 1990s. Look at those craft. They don't look like anything we've exhibited in the meantime. Those are redeveloped. They call them alien reproduction vehicles, or ARVs. McClandish was found dead, the gentleman in question who did our conference and put many things out about this, including a documentary about the ARV. He died, and he was found dead in 2021 of a self-inflicted shotgun wound. And you'll find a whole group of scientists who die under suspicious circumstances like that, dealing with the UFO file. But it's obvious from this and from his flux liner that he was revealing too much. He had put too much on the record. You have the same case with Amy Eskridge. She was somebody else who was in Huntsville, and her dad had worked in very, very secret projects relating to anti-gravity. And so they were on the cusp of something. She founded the Institute for Exotic Science. She shows up dead, self-inflicted gunshot wound in 2022 after saying McClandish had been killed by the X-Protect group. So, we need to keep these things in mind. This is what's moving in the background. And those people receive tremendous amounts of pressure when they're working in these projects. If we want to understand the disappearance of Major General William Neal McCaslin, we're going to have to get to his work in the UFO file. That's what has to go before Congress. And, I was happy to hear that Luna and Burchett were doing this MK Ultra hearing on May 13th. But I'll tell you, I'd be happy to table that thing and go straight for the missing scientists in Congress. Why aren't they doing that while the trail is hot right now? I've put the story forward. It's been picked up by Rolling Stone, CNN, and everybody else. That's where they should be going in Congress with this. How are you going to get to the bottom of it if you wait years and years to do it and just grandstand and take selfies on Twitter? That's not going to do it.
So the question is, why is it all coming to a head in a moment? But first, I want to go back because the crew was grabbing it. We have this foot.
Just to take a quick, that was a massive amount of information. That's kind of why I put this up. So this is the Alex Jones Show. It's about halfway through a couple hour long show. Again, this is what I like to just break into the middle of some of these long form podcasts, just to give people like an inside scoop, because some people don't watch it in its entirety. But that was a massive. I mean, there were so many name drops there. There was so much information there. I kind of do that just so that I'll go back, listen to some of the names, pick some things out, do a little bit of a deep dive on certain individual strands of this massive tree that this guy just put forth. But that's kind of like why I kind of do these segments like that, because I know it's a lot of information, and sometimes people don't get to it. So just put it out there in bite-sized chunks. Let's let Alex finish up right here.
Footage they released from a gun camera on a fighter jet, and they're saying it's an anomaly from the sun on the lens, probably is, who knows. But it looks like, and here's some screenshots, I'll just put it on screen, and because other ones have been photographed that look like this. You put that on screen, that'd be great. And so you have things like this photographed other places, and you have it in this gun camera flying around looking the same. And then you have in all these ancient medieval paintings, similar things, and ancient Egyptian paintings, similar things, Aztec, Mayan. And then now look at the movie Superman when he's escaping Krypton, and it looks exactly like this. I want to play a clip because they're always telling with predictive programming what they already know from Superman back in the early 1980s. Or the late 70s. They were using the nuclear power out of it. It's imploding. And they send off top scientists to sun. Everybody knows the story. But look at the craft.
That is pretty wild.
Marlon Brando there. So just an interesting parallel I thought of, Daniel Lewis.
Absolutely. And we all know that these things are run first through the movies. That's why you have Spielberg out there saying June 6th is Disclosure Day. That's when his movie is coming out after all.
And this is years in planning. You can see it all lined up, how staged it is. People ask, I don't know what stage. All the PR, all the rollouts.
Well, Alex, you're great for tracking the way that messages come in and how there's a fingerprint of different types of groups that are involved. If you have Victory Day as from World War II as the day you release aspects of the UFO file for disclosure, what is the message that you're saying there? In my opinion, it's some kind of warlike message that's saying we will triumph over the evil UFO threat. And in the case of these videos, you know, what we're looking at, they call them the star UFOs or the chandelier UFOs. Some people might say, well, you know, it's a lens flare, whatever it happens to be, but there's no question.
I've never seen a lens flare like that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, one thing you can say for sure also is that over the Middle East,
that's pretty wild.
They have appeared. We have seen more of these star type images over the Middle East, which is very odd. You don't see them in places like, you know, Japan or.
And what led the three wise men to Jesus in Bethlehem but a star?
There's no question. There's no question about it. And there is, you know, there's all kinds of things when you relate back to the Bible that incorporate this type of imagery. I mean, even manna in the desert, something is feeding them, you know, directly out of a cigar-shaped UFO, right? I mean, there are messages along this line, and you need to keep that in mind. There's also the Ezekiel vision, and there's no question around this. I think it's laced in that there's something that's been side by side with us, and it's not necessarily you know, just an extraterrestrial aspect. It's just something that's more advanced than we are. And there may be more than one group in relation to that. In fact, this was studied by the Brookings Institute in 1963. They came back and recommended to the president, you know, everything we know about UFOs don't put out there because the public can't handle it. But that was a great excuse for these people to accumulate tremendous wealth, tremendous knowledge, tremendous technology in the background working on these black projects. So when you get into the idea of breakaway groups, X-Tech groups, they're working with very, very sophisticated technology that the rest of the public has been left out of.
And let's be clear, a lot of the top figures I talk to and what I've been told is dead on, which you've alluded to many years, is that with AI and all this, if they've already broken away, then they can get control of time travel, which the AI simulation is already doing in computers faster than light. Then they would send a group forward into the future, and they would obviously start coming back and then try to manipulate the future by the past, which when Google was founded in 98, they said the plan was to have a giant neural interface, giant cyborg with the computers plugged into billions of people, not just so they could predict the future, but then manipulate stimuli and even control the present into the future, and then finally be able to even jump back in the past to control the future that way.
Well, it's fascinating. You don't even need time travel for it, because when you have a group of psychics or remote viewers who can do this type of activity, they would have the ability to project themselves into the future. How many people do we know, you know, from Nostradamus to Edgar Cayce and others who were able to see this is what's going to happen? You know, there's going to be earth changes, there's going to be world wars, there's going to be these different things that come in. They are the modern day prophets, right? And this is the nature of the thing. The whole idea of prophecy, even Revelation is a prophecy. He's looking forward. So he's going across time. So in a consciousness sense, they go straight across time. The idea of deliberate actual time travel was brought up by T.T. Brown, and I spoke to his daughter. That's Thomas Townsend Brown, one of those deepest, blackest project scientists that was going on. And he had a tremendous conscience for the work that he was doing. And the people, you know, like Curtis LeMay and others who were forcing him to use it for military means really caused his conscience to have a great deal of problems. But one of the things that he said when he was working with his assistants, and she told me about this conversation that they had. He asked him, do you think that, you know, time travel exists, to the assistant? And the assistant said, yeah, I absolutely think there is time travel. And he said, what would you do if you could go back in time? And he said, oh, I'd save my sister. And the assistant's daughter, sister had died in a drowning accident when she was 5 or 6. And he said, I would go back and save her. And T.T. Brown looked at him and said, well, there's rules in place against doing that. So, you know, that's very interesting that he even went to that point. But he had developed something, and this is open to interpretation. But go ahead.
No, I was listening to you, and I thought I was talk back telling the crew, roll more of the videos they released yesterday. Yes. So many of which I was asking you next, we've already seen. So again, just like I predicted, which wasn't hard to do, because it's the same people doing it. Just like they gave us old Epstein stuff and held up the binders. That only enrages people. What is the point of that? And again, back to the bigger question: why are they doing this now?
Well, that's a gigantic PR exercise if you compare it on the Epstein side. It's also very interesting because they get people to compete against one thing or the other. And so when somebody talks about Epstein, they say, well, they should look into UFOs. Or if they talk about UFOs, they say, oh, there's a distraction from the Epstein files. But all of it's ridiculous. All of it should be out there. There's room for all of these subjects. Bring them forward. There's no one thing that needs to be.
Well, that's a key thing you said. I noticed on the internet, and I love the people, so I follow what's happening with them. Not a minority, I mean, not a majority, but still a big minority, get mad and territorialize only one subject. When you cover other subjects that are all interconnected, they get mad and say you're covering up. No, you have to have a full field analysis, unified field theory to even understand this. You have to say everything.
It is. You walk and chew gum at the same time when you're studying these things. And here's the thing. We've been under the balkanization of the independent media. Now it's crowded in with corporate money. You know, I've done the studies through Fortune magazine and through others. You have all kinds of money rolling into these podcasts, and they are about as independent as, you know, people who are lobbyists for the White House. I mean, this is ridiculous. They're not independent at all, you know, and the thing is the money that's rolling in there is tremendous because they see, oh, the mainstream media, their message has failed. They can't keep this block in place around the UFO file. We need to move into the podcast space and we need to distract. And that's what they've been doing. And they do have incredible obfuscation operations. You know, you remember our late friend, Jim Mars, who wrote tremendous books back in the day. One of the things that he told me is the greatest tool that they have at their disposal, working, you know, in the background for the deep state, is obfuscation. That is flooding the zone. And that part of that flooding the zone going on is putting out a lot of wrong information in relation to UFOs. And it's funny because, you know, you and I look at a lot of this stuff and we say, oh, you know, here they are talking about, oh, there was a craft that sighted over Maury Island in 1947. You know, anyone who knows the subject understands that this took place. You know, it's just that they're rolling this out and pretending, oh, here's this great big disclosure for you. These are things that were available, in fact, in, you know, the late 1990s or the 2000s. So, you know, a lot of this is an IQ test. It's a stress test to see what they can
It really is, because they release a bunch of old stuff like they're revealing it, and they're just finding out who is a newbie, who doesn't understand all of this. And then we have all the Hollywood movies and all the pre-packaging, and you know, like you said, Close Encounters of the Third Time, and obviously a propagandist for the system, Steven Spielberg, now multi-years of production for this perfect time, releasing it in June, telling me we should see a peak and some cresting around there, because this is so pre-programmed. What do you think?
Oh, there's no question about it. And not only that, but, you know, you have the Top Gun Maverick people doing their own version of a UFO movie. They have the UFO whistleblowers like Grush and these other people who work with Mellon, the DOD billionaire who's controlling a lot of this. They're in the background rolling out these movies. They just did a new Bob Lazar movie and all the rest of it with big Hollywood productions. They're moving into it because what they decided at a certain point, they had really thrown a lot of spaghetti against the wall in the podcast field. And they didn't feel that they got, in my opinion, the buzz that they were looking for. They leapfrogged over the investigative process and they went straight for Hollywood, which isn't going to ask any questions after all. And the podcast space, a lot of these people who would come on these programs and talk about, you know, I was in this program, I was in that program, nobody would ask them a tough question. And then when I went into their backgrounds, you know, a lot of them were CIA counterintelligence people. Well, they're the best trained liars on the planet. Why would you believe those guys around the UFO file? And so there's a real knowledge gap that's going on there. I think the way to solve it is something that you've pointed out, and I think it reflects the danger of the current time and the place that we're in. Because one of the things you've pointed out is you can't be behind that curve. You have to be ahead of it. So what's coming in relation to the UFO file and the threats that they've been dangling out there when they were rolling out threats during this whole period, during COVID, when people were locked into their homes and had to be on the internet or watching TV, whatever it was, they started to roll out all of this TTSA junk with the UFO threat thing through Fox and all the rest of it, showing the Tic Tac, which was highly questionable in terms of UFO footage, in my opinion, by a long shot, and also had been around since 2007. It had already been floated on YouTube in 2007. So they're not even good releases. They just expect, as Alan Dulles did back in the CIA days, saying, don't worry, the American public doesn't read. Well, some of us do, and we know how to study this thing. The danger is being behind the curve, because when you're in the soup, like with COVID, then you're really in it. And I would say the missing scientists are the canary in the coal mine around the UFO subject, just like the missing and dead holistic doctors were the canary in the coal mine around the COVID op. And once you're in it, forget it. There's all kinds of things that are taking place. There's lockdowns, you know, there's things you can't do. You're closing restaurants. There are all sorts of things that go on that impact society. You can't wait till you're in the soup. And this is something that I think many of your listeners have learned over the years. You have to be ahead of that curve. And one of the things we've been able to do on my show is be able to be ahead of the subject so that people coming to me now are like, oh yeah, I remember when you were talking about this 5 years ago. Now they're rolling it out, and it seems like a dream that they're rolling it out with the threat. And they're even having people from NORAD and the Continuity of Government program starting to talk.
And we were able to predict it all, which, as we see the pre-programming. Speaking of Jim Marrs, what a good friend. And what makes me mad about being censored is most of our archive was on YouTube and on Instagram and on Facebook. So I'm even trying to find like films we made. Deathbed Confession of E. Howard Hunt, running the, killing Kennedy. It's all erased. We've got it on hard drives. We've got to put it back up. But I'm trying to find all these documentaries we made, us in the field, UFO investigations, you name it. And I can't find it, the crew can't find it either, just to show it's all been expunged. We'll find it re-uploaded. But it's just, what a precious guy Jim Marrs. Talk a little bit about him. I mean, he was working at the 4-Star Telegram when Kennedy was killed. He went to the same club, strip bar, in a nightclub with Jack Ruby. He reported on it when it happened. I mean, what a living legend he was.
Well, he was fantastic. And, some of his best shows were those shows that he did with you when he would come in studio. And I remember those, and they were classic. They got me thinking all kinds of things when Marrs was on. When I got to know him, I had done a documentary, and he got in touch with me about it, and we did a series of interviews. But I didn't realize that he was so astute and had written Alien Agenda and other books relating to the UFO file. This guy was remarkable, and he understood that they were using the same techniques from the deep state side of covering up, in relation to who was the real shooters, the groups that were involved, the Central Intelligence Agency, et cetera. He was so far ahead of the game. And when it got into the UFO file, he started to see the same types of tactics. So that was a real warning bell. And he told me that the groups that were involved around the UFO file were also involved in genetic manipulation, and that I should look into things like cloning, and that I should look into things on the genetic side. I thought that was the thing, because
I was rereading some of his books a few years ago. God, he had died like already 10 years ago. What a sweetheart, 8 years ago. But just a great Texan, great friend, and knew his wife well, knew his mom, all of them. And we hung out a lot. He'd come to town, we go to dinner, we drink some beer together. He was just awesome. A real.
Well, that is a massive, massive, massive amount of information. Yeah, I'm gonna have to start plugging away there. But again, the question still remains: why now? Obviously, a lot of reasons why, and it's never one dimensional, right? There's never just one answer. There's never one answer to the question when it comes to something like this. Obviously, it's a distraction. Obviously, there's some things that are going wrong. This might be the only way that Trump can pull out of this tailspin that he's in right now, with the administration, with the Iran war, with all the stuff going on, with all the gas prices, the economy. I mean, let's be quite honest. It is shaping up to be a pretty rough go right now for Middle America, for pretty much maybe 80% of Americans. It's shaping out to be a disaster. Why he went into Iran, we still have no idea. We can't figure this out. Did they have something on him? What was the reasoning? Tucker just released something saying that he was vehemently against going into Iran, and he did it. Why? We don't know. Maybe we'll never know. But I'm sure there is many reasons as to why these files are coming out now. And we'll see. We'll see what else comes out. We'll see what else happens. Again, take a look at the Alex Jones Show. Excellent. It's primarily on Rumble. I bring it to the YouTube and see if I can leave it here without it getting taken down. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. I'm John Soto. Check me out on please subscribe to the channel. If you want to follow me, next 6283 Talk is my X account. And we'll see you in the next show, guys. Take care.